Hello everyone and welcome to a new Codex review. Today I'm going to tell you about everything that's good in the new Genestealer Cults Codex. If you haven't already, guys, please hit that subscribe button, notifications bell in the corner over there so you know each time we release one of these videos. And if you enjoy this content and you would like more exclusive content, including additional battle reports every week, amazing discounts off our web store, or if you just like the channel and would like to support what we do, then head over to glasshammergaming.co.uk and join the elite. Right, guys, the Genestealer Cults Codex is out. So is the Custodes one. That's coming in 2 days' time. You'll get that on Thursday. But the review for Genestealer Cults is first because I'm a Xenos player. David's Imperium, so we're going to wait on those Custodes. He can wait to get what he wants. It's all about the Xenos first. So, Genestealer Cults Codex is here. I'm very excited. I never actually had the chance to play them in previous editions. When they first came out, the Genestealer Cults, they were so good. But the army was just too expensive and I could not do it. But slowly, I have been collecting Genestealer Cults and my collection has been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now we have a full army and the new books just dropped. So we're going to get them on the table very, very soon as well. Dale's just finished painting them for me. I have been basing them like crazy. I have like 5 characters left to base and 10 Atlan Jackal bikers, and then I'm done. That's all of my Genestealer Cults painted and based, and I think I have like a good 3,000-4,000 points of Genestealer Cults, so I should be able to give you some variety and show you guys what they can do on battle reports very soon as well. Right, so this is a Codex review, not a battle report, so let's move on to the Codex review part. So what we're going to do, I've got the book here. I've got my millions and bajillions notes that I normally write for you guys, just to, you know, just so I'm not just blabbering through the book. So what we're going to do is we are going to go through the book in the order that I've got it here. So I'm going to go through the whole book, but in some sections, like, of course, detachment abilities, I will explain the detachment abilities as they are. But some sections, like, for example, the Proficient Planning abilities, the Warlord Traits, the Relics, I'm not going to go through every single one. I'm just going to tell you the ones that I think are the best. So, you know, there's loads of people out there who are just reading the book word for word. So I'm assuming you guys already have seen some of that, so you know the basic gist of things. So instead of just reiterating it all, I'm going to tell you what I think are the good things about it, like the big winners about the Codex, but also some things are, I want to tell you why they're so bad as well. So that's how we're going to go through this Codex review. So starting off, let's have a look at the detachment abilities that you get for having a Genestealer Cults detachment. So first of all, it says at the top of the page, a Genestealer Cults detachment is one that only includes models with a Genestealer Cults keyword. Same as every army out there, excluding models with the unaligned keyword. So that's just detachments. Now, it's not that big, you know, like, you know that you're going to have detachments that are just Genestealer Cults because the buffs are too big to not do that, do you know what I mean? So that's what it is. And a Genestealer Cults detachment gains the Gene Sect, Brood Coven, and Cult Creed abilities. And also Brood Brothers. I was about to say Brother Broods, and then I was like, no, I don't think that's right. Brood Brothers detachment abilities as well. So, and then also on top of that, Genestealer units in Genestealer Cult detachments gain Cult Creeds. Of course, that's like if you've got Space Marine, if you've got Ultramarines units and an Ultramarines detachment, then they get the Ultramarines chapter tactic. A Cult Creed is essentially a chapter tactic. And also, Genestealer Cults troop units in Genestealer Cults detachments all gain the objective secured keyword, which is great, you know, because troops are actually fairly good. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. Troops are actually pretty good for Genestealer Cults, so objective secured on them is pretty nice, depending on how many you're going to take in your army. So those 3 abilities that we quickly mentioned, let's just have a look what they do. So Gene Sect. Gene Sect means you can include a maximum of 1 of each Genestealer Cults character model in this detachment. So you can no longer take like 2 or 3 Kelemorphs in the same detachment. You can't take multiple Magus or Primus in the same detachment. Each character, I don't think it's just HQ either. You can include a maximum of 1 of each Genestealer Cults character model in this detachment. So not just HQ, you can only have 1 of any character per detachment. So if you want more of them, you've got to take more detachments, and that's going to cost you CP. I quite like that they've done that. That's pretty cool, because it might force people... It might encourage people, sorry, not force, because you can always start with less CP and just have extra detachments, but it might encourage people to incorporate like bigger synergy in their army where 3 or 4 different characters work together, but it gains you more CPs because you've only got to have 1 or 2 detachments in your army. So I'm quite a big fan of that. And also for each Genestealer Cults model with the HQ battlefield role that takes up a battlefield slot in this detachment, 1 of the Genestealer Cults character model can be included in the detachment without taking up a battlefield role slot. So then what that means is if you have 2 HQs in a patrol detachment, you can take 2 of any other character without taking up battlefield role slots. I love it because it means that you might get your entire army in 1 battalion. And that would be incredible. If you could fit it all in 1 battalion, it'd be very good. Very, very good for the army. And that means in a battalion, if you have 3 HQs, there's quite a few HQs, like, say, a Primus, a Magus, an Acolyte Icon Ward, a Patriarch. There's quite a few, HQs that you'll want to be taking. So if you take 3 of those in a battalion, you can include 3 other characters without taking up slots. What that does mean is you can have, like, 5 or 6 HQs in that detachment, but it's the words that you've got to listen to carefully, because it says for each model with the HQ battlefield role, that takes up a slot, 1 other Genestealer Cults character can be included in the detachment. It doesn't say another HQ role. So it's not like if you take 3 HQs, you can then have 2 or 3 HQs without taking up slots. It's any character. So for example, if you've got loads of elites in your army, if you like Aberrants and Pure Strain Genestealers, and you filled up your elite slots, if you've taken 3 HQs, you can then take 3 elite characters without taking up any slots. So it's 3 of any, like, for every 1 HQ, you can get 1 of any character without taking up a slot. Very big benefit there. So that's what GenSec does. So I think it's pretty good. You've had a limit where you can only take 1 of each character per detachment, but you've had a buff in the fact that you can take multiple characters in some cases without taking up slots. Very big. Then you've got the Brood Coven rule. Now, the Brood Coven is something that I saw coming a long way off, because loads of other armies like Necrons have got this kind of hierarchy, and they've made you stick to the hierarchy kind of thing. And that is what they've done here with the Brood Coven. So if your army includes any Patriarch models, you cannot select any other GSC model. Guys, I might say GSC quite a lot in this, and that's because I don't want to keep saying Genestealer Cult every time I say it. So GSC is short for Genestealer Cult, if you didn't know. So you can't select any of the GSC models as your Warlord. So if you have a Patriarch, the Patriarch must be your Warlord, which, it fits. He's at the top of the hierarchy in the Genestealer Cults Codex. So he's the one that, if you've got him, why would he listen to a Primus or an Acolyte Icon Ward? He wouldn't. He'd just rip their heads off and carry on. So Patriarchs must be your Warlords. But if your army does not include any Patriarch model, but it does have a Primus or a Magus, you cannot select any other GSC model as your Warlord. So you see the hierarchy unfolding here. So a Patriarch has to be your Warlord, but if you don't have a Patriarch and you have a Primus or a Magus, one of them has to be your Warlord. And if you don't have one of them in your detachment, Genestealer Cult character models in this detachment that do not have the HQ battlefield role cannot have a Warlord trait. So a Jackalauphus or a Acolyte Icon Ward, those guys can still have Warlord traits because they are HQ. But anyone else can't have a Warlord trait, which is quite cool, because I saw some videos saying that, oh man, if you take this Warlord trait on a Kelemorph or this one on a Biophagus, then they become incredible. But the Brood Coven rule says Genestealer Cult character models in this detachment that do not have HQ battlefield role cannot have a Warlord trait. So you can't take Warlord traits on anybody but your HQs, which in this hierarchy makes sense. So Primus, Magus, Patriarch, Acolyte Icon Wards, and Jackalauphus. I believe they're the only 5 HQs that you have, and those guys are the only ones that can have Warlord traits. So that's what that is. And then Cult Creeds, that doesn't really need explaining, the Cult Creeds. If you've got a whole detachment of Genestealer Cult, if every unit in that detachment belongs to the same cult, then they all gain a cult creed ability. So you can't mix in there. You can't have four-armed Emperor and bladed Cog in the same detachment and still gain cults. If you do that, you'll lose your cult creeds. So if they all belong to one cult in one detachment, that detachment gets cult creeds. Brood Brothers as well. I don't really think that needs explaining. So basically, if your army is battle forged, you can have, for every Genestealer Cult detachment you have, I think maybe this has changed because I think you could mix and match them before, but now for every Genestealer Cult detachment that you've got in your army, you can take one Astra Militarum detachment as well. And that Astra Militarum detachment, you replace all units that have got the regiment keyword with Brood Brothers. And also, you can only take regiment units and unaligned units. So if they're not unaligned and they don't have the regiment keyword, then you can't take them. So I believe like Bulgrin, they have like the Ministorum keyword, but they're not unaligned and they don't have a regiment. So I don't think you can take Bulgrin. So it's that kind of thing there. And also you can only include units with the regiment, regiment or unaligned, and then you replace the keyword like we just said. Models cannot be selected as your warlord or have a warlord trait. So no Brood Brothers can be your warlord, and none of them can even be bought a warlord trait either. And also, Brood Brothers models cannot be given any relics. Now, interesting thing here, guys, that does mean something. If you want some out of line of sight shooting and you want to go down the guard route, you want to add some guard to your army, it's not the end of the world. You can have manticores in your army, right? You could take like a company commander, one unit of guardsmen to run around and play the mission, and you can take a manticore. Now, there's an interesting thing here. There is an interesting thing here. So you cannot, and I'm not sure if this works or not, but here it says models cannot have warlord traits and models cannot be given relics. But can you spend the tank A stratagem on your army list and give a manticore a tank case? That's something that maybe needs looking at. I will have a look in the guard book, and I will mention in the comments of this video, guys, as soon as I've had a look in the guard book, whether you can do it, or maybe you have to give it to a regiment vehicle. You may have to give it to a regiment vehicle. If you have to give it to a regiment vehicle, regiment's been replaced by Brood Brothers, in which case you would not be able to. But if you don't have to give it to a regiment, if it's just an Astra Militarum, unit, then you can maybe take a full payload manticore in your army, which would be cool. I mean, going down the Tyrannid route and adding Hive Guard is probably the best way of getting some out of line of sight in there, but a manticore is not a bad shout, and that's the way you do it through a Brood Brothers detachment. So there we are. So yeah, I don't think anything else really needs explaining there. So they are your detachment abilities. So remember, guys, when we're writing our list, remember to stick to this. That's a lot of people get caught out in the list writing step because, the wrong model is their warlord when they have somebody else in their army who stops that from happening. They take warlord traits on characters that normally are not allowed to take warlord traits and stuff like that. So remember that is a thing. So that's detachment abilities. Let's move on and have a look at the Proficient Planning section. So the Proficient Planning section, guys. Now these are the points upgrades that every new codex is gaining. So in the Marines, it's like when you can upgrade a captain to be a chapter master, you pay 40 points and you get certain abilities. A chaplain to a master of sanctity and you get certain abilities. It's that kind of thing. So they are called Proficient Planning abilities. Now, if your army is Battleforged, you can take Proficient Planning abilities. You can select any Genestealer Cult unit from your army, and their points value is increased by the amount shown in the table here in front of me, and then they gain an ability. Now, no unit can have an ability that somebody else has already got, and no unit can be given two. So every unit can only have one Proficient Planning ability, and also they cannot, none of them can be repeated in your army. So one unit cannot be given a Proficient Planning ability that another unit has already got. Because if you could do that, guys, some of these would be bonkers insane if you could duplicate them, but you can't. So let's not have a look at that. Right, so this is a section. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 abilities. There are 10 abilities to choose from. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are the ones that I'm going to talk about because I think they're the best 6. The other four you may want to use because you might be building your army in a specific way, or you might like more of a fluffy army. But these are the ones that I think are the best and you can make use of in a competitive game in a very good way, basically. So the first one is the first one on the list. Lying in wait. It is also the most expensive one because it is pretty good. So lying in wait, you can pay 20 points and put it on a unit. And what it does, it's for an infantry unit only, which was expected when you know about the ability. When the unit is set up on the battlefield as reinforcements, as a result of being set up underground, it can lie in wait. If it does so, the following two bullet points apply. So underground. Underground is when you set up a unit in reserve, basically, but the Genestealer Cult way. So when you deploy units, if they have the conceal ability, we will come to that later on, but if they're the conceal ability, you can either put them in ambush or put them underground, and only infantry units can go underground anyway, infantry or bikers, I believe. So when you go underground an infantry unit, when they come on as reinforcements, you can set up this unit anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 3 inches away from any enemy models. Powerful. You can arrive 3 inches away from enemy models. But there is a catch, and that's the second bullet point. Until the end of the turn, this unit is not eligible to declare a charge with. So you can come on 3 inches away from the enemy with this unit that you've paid 20 points for, but you cannot charge that turn. So it's very specific, but you could maybe do it with a unit that you're going to predominantly use for shooting. I think that's very good. And the reason why I really like this, guys, is you're paying 20 points for it, whereas before you had to spend, I believe, 2 CP to come in, or 3 CP to come in 3 inches away and not be able to charge. Because I know this was a stratagem before where you could come 3 away from the enemy and not charge that turn, but I believe it was 2 or 3 CP. I think it was 2 actually, 2 CP. But you know, Genestealer Cults really like their CPs, and that's why they were struggling in the current meta with their old rules, is that every time you take a detachment, you're punished because you lose CP. And then for all these really cool stratagems they had, they were very expensive because the book was written in the previous edition where every detachment you took gave you CPs. So the book was written in a time where you could take 3 battalions and start the game with 18 command points, and you could use 2 or 3 CP strats like every turn for 3 turns and have your army functioning properly. But then when the new edition came in and every detachment loses you command points, when you go from 18 command points to starting the game with maybe 9 or 10, you've lost half your command points already, but none of the stratagems changed. They all still cost 2 or 3 CP, so it was very hard to kind of keep your army functioning the way that it's designed to function. So I like that they've done this. They've gone, here's some cool abilities that you used to be able to do with stratagems. Now we're going to let you buy upgrades point-wise to do them, so you can save your CPs and actually use all of the cool stratagems that we're going to give you. So that's, in my opinion, that's a huge, huge benefit. And I think if you come in with a unit that's got like hand flamers on it, loads of guns on them, then this is a brilliant stratagem to use, but also this can steal people's primaries away from them. So you could, for example, take a five-man Acolyte unit, and Acolytes are 9 points each. So you can have a 5-man Acolyte unit, 45 points, buy this upgrade on them, and they go up to 65 points. Now you might think, oof, 5 Acolytes at 65 points. I'm paying 13 points a model for some 6 up or 5 up save 1 wound models. But what you need to understand is that unit has the objective secured ability. So even if your opponent is holding an objective, so the center of an objective is there, you can hold it by being within 3 inches of this side or 3 inches of this side. So if your opponent is like over here and they're holding an objective and they've got 2 or 3 models on that objective, 3 inches away from them is on this side of the objective. So you could quite easily line 5 Acolytes on this side of the objective and put 5 offset models on there and, like, for example, steal your opponent's home field objective marker and give them 0 primaries potentially for a turn. Paying 20 points for the ability to maybe make your opponent score 0 is massive. So I think lining weight is brilliant for something like that. The next one is Alchemist Supreme. Well, the next one I want to talk about. Exacting Planner is in there, so we're going to just skip over that one. I don't think it's great. Alchemist Supreme. This one I think is incredible when you know the model you can put it on. It's 15 points. A Biophagus model only. Now, we're going to come to a Biophagus when we talk about units. He's awesome. Now, what this lets you do, and we're going to talk about this ability more when we talk about his unit. I'm just going to tell you what it can do. When you give a unit this ability, so when you buy this for a Biophagus on your army list, you must select one Cult Core or Cult Aberrant unit from your army. Most of the time, it's going to be Aberrants, guys. Then select one genomic enhancement for that unit to gain. So one unit can gain a genomic enhancement on your army list before you've even started the game. And the genomic enhancements are pretty good. We're going to cover those when we come to the biophagus, like I say. So, but I think that's a very good one. Remember that, guys. Keep that in your head for when we get to that section. A trap sprung. Now this, in my opinion, is definitely one of the best ones. A trap sprung, 15 points, and it makes your unit reliable. When this unit is set up on the battlefield as reinforcements as a result of being set up underground, so again, when they come on from reserve, until the end of the turn, each time a charge roll is made for this unit, roll one additional dice and discard one of the dice. So you can charge 3d6 picking the two highest. So it makes you a lot more reliable. You know, before you would have to just roll 2 dice and hope you get in. Now you roll 3 and get rid of the lowest one, and the top 2 is your range. This is amazing because a lot of your army will be in reserve. That's the way that Genestealer Cult play. You know, they have this base on the ground that comes out from blips, and they go around holding objectives and doing secondaries for you. And then all of a sudden, these units, these big hard-hitting units, drop in from reserve, out from underground, and they need to make their charges. So anything that can make charges more reliable is definitely worth it. And when you consider you might be putting this on like a 10-man aberrant unit, that aberrant unit is 300 points. Would you not pay 15 points to get a reliable charge on a 300-point unit? I think most of the time you would. So a trap sprung is one of my favorite ones. Next one is a perfect ambush. This one is great for a shooting unit. Crossfire unit only. Now, Crossfire is a keyword that quite a few units have, and they have the Crossfire ability, which we'll come to later. When this unit is set up on the battlefield as reinforcements, as a result of being underground, again, you can use this ability. If you do, select one enemy unit within 12 inches of this unit. Until the end of the turn, each time a model in this unit makes a ranged attack against that enemy unit, the enemy unit is treating as having a crossfire marker and as being exposed for that attack. Now, having a crossfire marker, we will talk about what they do. Oh, actually, they are next. The crossfire markers are next. So we'll talk about that just after the other 3 abilities, the other 2 proficient planning abilities here. So basically what it lets you do is come out from reserve with 1 unit, and when you target a specific unit with ranged attacks with models in this unit, then that unit is treated as being exposed and having a crossfire marker on it. Then we have got from every angle. Now this one is only 10 points. Quite like the fact that it's only 10 points. It's quite powerful. So at the start of the first battle round, that means after you have rolled the dice to see who is going first, right? If the mission uses strategic reserves, which it does, you can place this unit into strategic reserve without spending any command points. And also, when setting up this unit from strategic reserves, you treat the battle round number as being 1 higher than it actually is. And it does say in its own sentence, note that this means this unit can arrive from strategic reserves in the first battle round. So you can, for 10 points, you can put a unit that's on the board, you can put them into reserve at the start of your first battle round, and then bring them back on in your first turn at the end of your first reinforcement step from strategic reserve and make a charge. I think that's a fantastic ability for just 10 points. I think to do it, to put the scare element onto your opponent and make them deploy differently, this is a great one to have. And the last one I want to talk about is they came from below, because I think this you want to put on pure strain Genestealers. Twisted Helix ones especially, because Twisted Helix gets +1 into their move. But pure strain Genestealers having they came from below is amazing. And it is only a 10-point upgrade. Check how powerful this is. They came from below. Non-vehicle unit only. Pure strain Genestealers are infantry. This unit is set up in, if this unit is set up in ambush, that means in a blip on the board, then when revealing ambush markers, you can do one of the following. Remove 1 ambush marker from the battlefield and set up this unit underground. So what you can do is you can put 1 blip right on the line, 1 ambush marker right on the front line to scare people what's going to come out of there in charge. And then what you can do is if you don't go first, when you reveal that marker, you can take that marker off the board and go, actually, these pure strain Genestealers are now underground, which is a very powerful thing to do. Or, and I like this bit, After setting up this unit from an ambush marker, this unit can make a normal move as if it were your movement phase, but must end that move more than 9 inches away from any enemy models. So what you could do is, if your opponent goes first, you could reveal it, get the Genestealers out, and move them 8 inches in any direction that you want, which is very powerful. Or if you're going first and you've put that marker on the line, you can reveal the marker, get your Genestealers out. Those Genestealers can then move 8 inches forward. They're going to stay 9 away from enemy, but they can move 8 inches forward, and then in your first turn, they can move again, because this is in your command phase. You reveal markers at the start of your first command phase. So you're revealing it in your command phase, and you get to move in your command phase. Then you move again in your movement phase, and Genestealers can advance and charge. So they move in the command phase, then move and advance in the movement phase, and then charge, which gives you a massive threat range, and people really have to be careful about it. So that is the Proficient Planning abilities. I've ran you through all the best ones, and now what we're going to talk about is Crossfire, because that links in with Perfect Ambush that we just spoke about, and this is the super buff. So you get this if you are a pure Genestealer Cults army. Let's see what it does. So Crossfire, what does Crossfire actually do? If every unit from your army has the Genestealer Cults keyword, excluding unaligned units, and the percentage ratio of Brood Brothers is 25% or less, then this unit can use this ability, and the following rules apply. But also, one very specific thing here. If every unit from your army that belongs to a cult belongs to the same cult, then you get these abilities. So it's a little bit limited here. It's not like you can just have a pure Genestealer Cults army, which is what I think it should be, to be honest with you. You should be able to have like a Twisted Helix detachment and a 4-armed Emperor detachment and still be able to use this buff for having pure Genestealer Cult army, because that would make sense. But what they've done is they've said you have to be from one cult. So your whole army has got to be like 4-armed Emperor and nothing else. But if that happens, then you get the Crossfire rule. And how does it work? In your shooting phase, each time a Crossfire unit is selected to shoot, if all of those attacks target one enemy unit without a Crossfire marker, then after resolving those attacks, the target gains a Crossfire marker if any of the following conditions are satisfied. So if 5 or more of those attacks score a hit, or if one or more of those attacks with a damage characteristic of more than 1 scored a hit. At the end of your turn, remove all Crossfire markers enemy units have. So they last for the turn. So in your shooting phase, if your entire unit shoots once, you can't split fire. If your entire unit shoots one enemy unit and you get 5 hits with 1 damage weapons, or 1 hit with multiple damage weapons, then they are said to have a Crossfire marker gained to them. So they have a Crossfire marker put on them. And the effects of Crossfire, fairly decent. So each time a Crossfire model makes a ranged attack, if the target unit has a Crossfire marker on it, you add 1 to the attack's hit roll. So once a unit has got a Crossfire marker on it, when the rest of your army essentially makes, well, Crossfire units in your army, because it can only be people with a Crossfire keyword. So every time a Crossfire model in your army makes a ranged attack, then you get +1 to hit against that target. And if it's exposed, then you get +1 to wound as well. Now, exposed is a little bit of a weird rule. I would recommend you have a look at the diagrams in the codex. I'm sure other people out there have already explained, like read out word for word what exposed is. So because it's a bit complicated, I'm not going to cover it here. So basically, for a unit to be exposed, I'm just going to tell you quickly, is if there is an enemy unit here, and then I have 1 unit over here and 1 unit over here that are Genestealer Cult. If I can draw a line between this one model in this unit and through the base of one model in the target unit, and it then touches one base in a model in a unit on my other unit. Oh my god, that was terrible. Let me just say that again. So there is 1 unit in the middle over here, enemy unit. I have 2 units, 1 here, 1 here. They both have ranged weapons. They both have the Crossfire keyword. If I can draw a straight line that goes from one base of a model in this unit, and it crosses through one base in the enemy unit, and then it reaches one base of a model in this unit in my army, then that unit in the middle is said to have been exposed, because essentially they are caught in the middle of two of my units. So I have to be able to draw a line from one model over here through the enemy base, and then it has to touch another base, that line, that straight line, it has to go that way, and then the unit in the middle is said to be exposed, and then every range attack in your army against that unit gets +1 to wound. It's fairly powerful, but everything that we're saying here is ranged attacks. So all of these things seem like they benefit ranged attacks, and I'm not sure whether that is such a big super buff. But Crossfire is useful for some other things too. It's not just for things like this. You can use it for other things, and it might make it worth it at that point, because there are some stratagems and some abilities that characters have that help Crossfire along, or there are some stratagems where if a unit has a Crossfire marker on it, then you can use this stratagem. So just for those things, it might be worth, you know, sticking to this and having Crossfire markers. But personally, I don't think shooting armies is the way that you're going to be going if you take Genestealer Cult. I think now a combat army suits them a lot better, because the way that they're going to want to play is trade with the enemy on objectives, trade units and kill things on objectives and get onto the objectives themselves. I don't think ranged armies are what you want to do with them. I think you may have some ranged units in your army, and Crossfire would be great on those, but I don't think it's the be-all and end-all, basically. So that is that. And on the same page, there is a rule called Summon the Cult. Summon the Cult is incredible. An Acolyte Icon Ward is now a must-take. So we're going to explain what Summon the Cult is when we talk about the Icon Ward, because we will talk about the Icon Ward. And now what we're going to do is, consulting my notes, we are going to move on to relics and explain which relics are worth it. So like I said before, you know, everybody has gone through the relics and said word for word what all the relics do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk through some of the ones that I think are actually pretty good. So the first one is the first one in the relic section. It is called the Sword of the Void's Eye. I actually think this one's pretty good. It's a model equipped with a Cult Bone Sword or Locust Blades only. So you can take it on a Locust, or you can take it on someone like a Primus. I think it's pretty good on models like that. So what it does is it replaces the Cult Bone Sword or the Locust Blades, and it gives the bearer +2 strength, AP -3, and flat 2 damage. Now, I think if it was just going to buff your stats in that way, it might not be worth it. So, for example, if we have a look at a Primus and the Cult Bone Sword on a Primus makes him strength 5 -2, 2 damage. And this sword is going to make him strength 6 -3, 2 damage. So it's essentially going to give him +1 strength and an extra point of AP, which is good. It's good, but is that worth a relic? Probably not if it was just that. But the ability that the Sword of the Void's Eye gets is really good. So the ability is each time an attack is made with this weapon, you can re-roll the hit roll and you can re-roll the wound roll. So that character re-rolls all hits and all wounds. Now it's worth it. So instead of having like 4 or 5 attacks, hitting on 2s and then wounding on 3s or 4s with no re-rolls, you've now got, you know, those same 4 or 5 attacks that get hitting on 2s, re-rolling any ones that you roll, re-rolling any misses that you roll, and then wounding on 3s or 4s with full re-rolls. So that increases your damage potential massively. And then, so when you've added +1 strength and you've got full rerolls to wound and you've got an extra point of AP, that's a great relic. And that makes that combat character a bit of a beast and a threat. So they don't just have to be buffing people, they can actually go in and do some damage when they need to. So I really like Sword of the Void's Eye. Hand of the Aberrants, meh. And then the next one is Amulet of the Void Worm. I love, that's all I had to say about Hand of Aberrants. Amulet of the Void Worm. So I want to start off by saying it's not great. And the only reason I'm mentioning it is it may be big when New Tau comes in. And New Tau is just around the corner and we all know it. So first of all, it gives the bearer a 4+ invulnerable save. Now my first thoughts when I thought about this was, oh, I'd like to give this to a Patriarch. But the bearer has a 4+ invulnerable save. He's already got a 4+ invulnerable save, so that would be null and void. Once per battle though, I like this ability. When an attack is allocated to the bearer, it can channel the shadow in the warp. If it does so, the saving throw is automatically a 6. Do not roll. So you have to decide before you make the roll, but one of your saves, just becomes a 6. So essentially, it'll count as you passing, rolling a 6 on your invulnerable save, which will be a pass in pretty much all cases. Then the final thing, each time the bearer declares a charge, the enemy units that were targeted by that charge cannot fire Overwatch or set to defend against that charge. So not firing Overwatch is pretty big. So you can get this character, if this character is a combat character, you can get him into some good spots and not fear about being Overwatched, which I think is great. And imagine with Tau. Tau's going to have some crazy Overwatch abilities. They always have. So this could help in those situations. But other than that, I don't think it's that great. I like the once per game you can make a save of 6. If you get hit by like one attack that's d6 damage, you can just go, all right, that's the one, I'm going to automatically pass that, which is also a powerful ability. But yeah, if you're not, I don't think there's very many armies in the meta that Overwatch that insanely. So I don't think it's key at the moment, but maybe when Tau come in, like I say, that'll change. Presses Bane, Dagger of Sacrifice, the Wormtooth rounds. That's the other one I wanted to talk about. Wormtooth rounds are very good on a Kelemorph. So it's a Kelemorph only. Each time the bearer shoots, you can select any number of Liberator auto stubs it is equipped with. Now, a Kelemorph is equipped with 3 Liberator auto stubs. So you can select any number of those stubs to fire a Liberator Wormtooth round. If you do, then until the shooting is resolved, each Liberator auto stub you selected has the following profile. So it's range 18 inches, exactly the same as a normal gun. Heavy 1. So instead of pistol 2, it's heavy 1. But it is strength 6, -3, flat 3 damage. 2 damage, I'd say. 3 damage. Strength 6, -3, and 3 damage. That's insane. No, he's got 3 guns. It does say underneath, note, a Liberator Wormtooth round does not have the Liberator Auto Stubs ability. So the Liberator Auto Stubs ability is an ability that lets you target characters. So you can ignore the Lookout Sir rule, and every roll of a 6 to wound does a mortal wound. That's what it normally does. The guns normally have that rule. But if you fire this round, then that gun, however many guns you choose to fire that round, lose the ability to be able to snipe out characters. But this is fantastic. And the greatest thing about this relic is it says you can choose to fire a Liberator round. So it doesn't replace his other profile. He still has his normal profile and this profile as well. So it can choose to fire 6 pistol shots or 3 of these shots, or like 4 pistol and 1 of these, 2 pistol and 2 of these. So, it can choose what it wants to do. I think it gives you a lot of flexibility. That on a Kelemorph is incredible. And when we get to the Kelemorph, we'll talk a little bit more about why it's so good. Right, then the last 2 we want to talk about is the Crouchling. I think the Crouchling is a must-take. A model equipped with a Psychic Familiar only, and you replace the Familiar's ability with the following ability. The Crouchling. Once per Psychic phase, you can reroll 1 Psychic test taken for this model. That's huge, because some of the powers, we will come onto the powers eventually, but when we come onto the powers, you're going to see some of them are cast on a 6 or a 7, so they're quite like... They're like average roll casts, so all it takes is for you to roll slightly below average and you don't get your powers off. And the powers are very good that they have got now in the Broodmind Discipline. So some of those powers you're going to want to get off. And every psychic phase having the ability to re-roll one of your psychic tests is just huge. So I think it's an auto take just for that. But it's got a second ability, and that is each time a psychic test is passed for this model, so not just the one that you re-roll, but each time a psychic test is passed for this model, if all dice results for that test were the same, that psychic power or psychic action cannot be denied. So if you cast a power of double 3 or a double 4 or a double 5, that power cannot be denied. It just goes off and no one can deny it. I think that is very powerful. So, like I'm saying, some of the powers are very essential. So to have a reroll to get one of them off every turn is incredible. But if you roll a double on any of those essential powers, man, it can't even be denied. So the Crouchling, I'll be taking the Crouchling in every game I play. I think that is the best relic by far, by far. Then the other one that I really like, and I think I'll be taking this most of the time as well, is called the Cranial Inlay, and this is the final one. And it's for a Nexus model only. And while the bearer is on the battlefield, each time you spend a command point to use a stratagem, you can roll 1d6, and on a 5+, that command point is refunded. Now, obviously, you can only refund 1 command point every battle round, but the fact that you can refund it, I think is very, very good. But also, the bearer can use its strategic coordination ability 1 additional time per turn. Now, the strategic coordination, I have got a nexus right here, just to tell you what it does quickly. Strategic coordination. So in your command phase, and this is a very good ability, in your command phase, you can select a friendly cult core unit anywhere on the battlefield. Then select a Primus, Jackalauphus, or Clamavus within 6 inches of this Nexus model. And then that core unit that's anywhere on the board counts as being in range of the aura abilities of the character that you've just chosen, and can be selected for abilities that those models have that, you need to pick a friendly unit in a certain range for, like priority target. So for example, I could pick a core unit on the opposite side of the board, and then I could choose a Primus who was within 6 inches of my Nexus, and then that unit on the other side of the board would count as having the aura abilities of that Primus that's in my deployment zone. So I think that's very powerful to be able to have that ability, and imagine using that ability twice. So I think the Relic is good enough. I would take the Relic just to be able to use that ability twice, because I think that's very big. But imagine you're also getting a 5-up CP regen on top of that. The Crouchling and the Cranial Inlay, the last 2 relics that we've just talked about there, are the best 2 in this book by far. So that is relics. Now let's have a look at Warlord traits. So Warlord trait section now, guys. Basically, there are 6 Warlord traits that you can take here, and I think 3 of them are good. I don't think very many of them are good. 3 of them are good. Some of them situationally, like for example, there's one called Biomorph Adaptation. You can add one to the attacks and toughness characteristic of this Warlord. Situationally, that can be good. If you're taking a Patriarch and you want to use him for combat, giving him an extra attack and then making him a little bit tougher to kill can be a good thing. But I don't think that's worth using a Warlord trait on. Now, the 3 that I think are great. Number one, in my opinion, is the best one. So number 1 is Focus of Adoration. Best one. While a friendly Cult Core or Cult Pure Strain Genestealer unit, because Pure Strain Genestealers are not core, but it's good that they affected them with this Warlord trait. While a friendly Cult Core or Cult Pure Strain Genestealers unit is within 6 inches of this Warlord, that unit is eligible to perform heroic interventions as if it were a character unit. Imagine that. Your units, all of your combat units within 6 inches of your Warlord can all perform heroic interventions as if they were characters. Fantastic Warlord trait. People try to steal objectives off you, your units can just heroically intervene. And you're not spending CPs, it's just happening from a Warlord trait. I think that's the best one by far, especially on a combat-based army. Then the other 2 that I think are okay, number 1 is Prowling Agent. Once per turn, when this Warlord is selected as the target of a charge, but before the charge roll is made, and after firing any Overwatch, it can make a normal move of up to 6 inches. Now, it's a bit of a shame because you can't take Warlord traits. Remember we were saying Warlord traits can only be given to HQ rolls in this detachment, because I would love to put this on a Kellamorph. Can you imagine a Kellamorph? He can, with this, he can fire Overwatch and then move 6 inches away so you can't charge him anymore. I think that would be great. But as it stands, you can't. You can only put it on a HQ. So, something like a Patriarch, this is what I would rather put on a Patriarch if I was going to send him into stuff for combat. So imagine you go across the board, you charge something, and then the opponent, if they don't have any ranged attacks that can deal with him at that time, they're going to have to charge him back to kill him. Now, when he can move 6 inches before that charge roll is made, that's huge, man. Imagine the enemy, they have to go 1 inch away from you and then declare a charge on you. So even if they're 1 inch away from you and then you move 6 inches, they're now 7 inches away from you. So they have to make a 7-inch charge because, they have to be more than 1 inch away from you. And then, you move 6 and more than 7 away. So they have to roll a 7, which is like an average charge. They roll 1 below average, they're going to fail their charge, and they're stood right next to you. So I quite like Prowling Adjutant. It's very cool on a combat character, but for a combat character, in my opinion. Then you've got Preternatural Speed. That is the 3rd one I think is good. Each time this Warlord makes a melee attack, you can re-roll the hit roll. I think it's better than having 1 attack is re-rolling your hit rolls. Because, for example, a Patriarch, if you give him that +1 attack Warlord trait, he's got 7 attacks. But normally he's got 6 attacks and he can re-roll his hits. It's about the same, but it gives you redundancy, and that's what I like. So, for example, You're giving him a 7th attack with the other Warlord trait. He's hitting on 2s, so he should get 6 hits, right? Because you should roll 1-1. But with this Warlord trait, you've got 6 attacks. You should roll 1-1, but you can re-roll your hit rolls, so you should also get 6 hits. So both Warlord traits are giving you 6 hits. But the thing is, you could roll those 7 dice and roll 3 1s. It does happen. And in the same way, when you roll your 6 attacks, you could roll 3 1s, but re-rolling their hit roll, that could push you back up to 5 or 6 hits again. So it gives you redundancy. And for that reason, I think this one is better. But also, that's not all it gives you. At the start of the fight phase, if this Warlord is within engagement range of any enemy units, it can fight first that phase. So that is basically a free interrupt. So if somebody charges another unit in your army and also charges this Warlord, he can interrupt for free, essentially. He will fight after one charging unit because he has the always fight first ability. So he will be able to interrupt for free and fight next after one of your opponent's units. And also he'll be able to reroll all of his hit rolls. So combat character again, I think this is wicked on. So Prowling Adjutant and Preternatural Speed are great Warlord traits for combat characters. And Focus of Adoration, the main character who is sitting in your bubble and is giving all these auras out, like if he's got any good auras to give out, you take Focus of Adoration on him and everybody can only intervene. I think that is the best one by far. Now we move on to the Broodmind Discipline. The Broodmind Discipline is actually really cool. 2 powers in there, like mind control, I think is pretty crap now. No, never really going to want to take that. Mental Onslaught, a lot worse than what it used to be. Some people may still like it, but it's like the 5th power in the list, definitely. So only if you've got spare casts, which I don't think you will. The other 4 powers are great though. So 2 Psychers with 2 powers each. The other 4 powers are fantastic. Let's see what they are. First one is Mass Hypnosis. This one always was great and it still is great. But it's Warp Charge value 7. So remember I was telling you, you're going to want the Crouchling because the Crouchling's like essential. Whichever character has got Mass Hypnosis, he's casting down on a 7. So he really wants to have the Crouchling. You really want to give him Mass Hypnosis and either Psychic Stimulus or Might from Beyond because those are power level 6 as well. Warp Charge value 6, sorry. So Warp Charge value of 7, and you select an enemy unit within 18 inches and visible to the Psyker. You subtract 1 from the attacks characteristic of models in the unit, and they fight last in the fight phase. So you pick an enemy unit, not only do they fight last, which is fantastic when you've got an all-combat army, pretty much, in Genestealer Cult, but also you reduce their attacks characteristic by 1, which is huge. Fight last is a fantastic psychic power. Quite a few armies have got a psychic power that makes people fight last, but that's all it does. Reducing the attacks by 1 as well, definitely the best. This is the best power in the book, in my opinion. Then we've got Psionic Blast, which is really cool. It's basically like a second smite. It's cast on a warp charge value of 5, and you choose an enemy unit within 18 inches. And visible, of course. But just any enemy unit. So it doesn't have to be the closest. It could be like at the back of the 18 inches. But if you want to choose a character, you've got to follow the Lookout Sir rules as if it was a ranged attack. So you can't just pick a character if he's got 10 models around him. A character would have to be like the closest model and stuff like that. If he's got 3 other models within 3 inches of him, then he's got to be, if he's got a unit that's got 3 models in, then he has to, like within 3 inches of him, then he has to be the closest target to you for you to be able to pick him. So it's basically Lookout Sir, but on a psychic power. A little bit weird. I'm a bit disappointed that you can't choose a character because it would be really cool if you could. It's cast on a 5 and it does D3 mortal wounds, but if your psychic test matches or exceeds the leadership characteristic of the unit trying to catch it on, then they take 3 mortal wounds instead of D3. So no roll required, just 3 mortal wounds. So what a great power. I think that's incredible. It lets a character do 2d3 mortal wounds because you can go in there, cast Smite, and then cast Psionic Blast, do 2d3 mortal wounds, and then charge something, which I think is brilliant. Then we're on to the last 2. Psychic Stimulus, warp charge value 6. If selected, you've got to choose a friendly cult unit within 18 inches and visible to the Psyker. Key thing though, just cult unit, not cult core, because we know that Pure Strain Genestealers and Aberrants are not core, but these just rely you to be a cult unit. You don't have to be core. So any cult unit within 18 and visible to the Psyker, until the start of your next psychic phase, the unit can advance and shoot and charge. So even if you've advanced, you can shoot and charge. And if you've fallen back, you can shoot and charge. So very powerful spell there. And also, a unit that advances doesn't suffer the penalty for firing assault weapons after advancing. So it's very, very powerful, this spell. I really like it. Especially for a combat army to have access to advance and charge. very big, and even fallback and charge can get you out of some sticky situations. So that power is going to be awesome. And the final one is Might from Beyond. This one got nerfed a little bit. It used to give +1 attack and strength to a unit. Now it just gives +1 attack characteristic to a unit. But it's still good, you know. Like we said, you're an all-combat army. Their attacks in general have gotten slightly more powerful anyway. So having the +1 attack, I think is very good. Cast on a 6 again, and again, it is a cult unit within 18 inches invisible. Cult again, not cult core. So very powerful. You can use Psychic Stimulus and Might from Beyond to buff units, Aberrants and Pure Strength Genestealers if you want. So they don't have to be core, just cult units. But both of them do need line of sight. So be careful. You can't do it around walls. So your positioning has to be right. Chapter approved rules, guys. This is the next thing. So, you know, every new book contains secondaries that are army specific, and in the same way, Genestealer Cult have got secondaries that are specific to them. So if your entire army is Genestealer Cult, then you can choose one of the secondaries listed here rather than one of the secondaries from the book, and it would go in the correct category. Now, they're not great. I don't think they're great, but the Battlefield Supremacy one is the best one, so that's the one I'm gonna talk to you about today. So it's in the Battlefield Supremacy. So instead of doing Engage on all fronts or Stranglehold, and I know this army is very good at doing Engage on all fronts, but sometimes you may want to do this one. And it is called Brood Swarm. So Brood Swarm, at the end of your turn, so it's not the end of the battle round, your own turn. So that's good, because I know a lot of them have been battle round and they make them pretty hard to do. So at the end of your own turn, score 1 victory point for each of the following that applies, to a maximum of 4 victory points, right? So number 1, if you have more models within your opponent's deployment zone than your opponent does, that's hard to do. You have more models within your deployment zone than your opponent does, that's easy. So you should get 1 point a turn regardless, because you should have more models in your own deployment zone than your opponent does, especially with an army like Genestealer Cult. And the next one, you have more models on the battlefield that are not within either player's deployment zone than your opponent does. So more models in no man's land, which quite a lot of the time you will do. And the last one is if all 3 of the above bullet points apply, you get an extra point. So if you have more models in your own deployment zone, you'll get a point a turn. If you have more models in your deployment zone and no man's land than your opponent does, then you're going to get 2 points a turn. So that's quite nice. And it doesn't require you, like Engage on all fronts, to go into the other half of the board. You can just sit in your own half, just in no man's land, which is not in anyone's deployment zone, and in your deployment zone, and you can get 2 points a turn for this quite comfortably. Very nice. But also, when your opponent starts later on in the game and they start coming out at you and they have less models in their deployment zone, you know, maybe they've got like 3 or 4 tanks or something like that sitting at the back and that's all they've got, then you can like bring a 15-man unit in from ambush or from underground in their deployment zone and go, right, well, I've got 15 models in your deployment zone, because it's not units, it's models. And then all of a sudden you could get 4 points, because if you have more in their deployment zone as well, then you get 4 points for that secondary. I think that's very, very powerful. So that's a great secondary. I don't think any of the others are particularly spicy. And next, we are going to go on to talk about stratagems. Now, stratagems, guys, we're going to have a quick walkthrough of most of them, because actually they're quite cool. And one thing that I really like about the Genestealer Cult ones is they're quite cheap. A lot of these stratagems are 1 command point. I remember we were saying at the start before that, you know, Genestealer Cult's a tricksy army where they need to be able to use their stratagems to do well. Well, this kind of is reinforcing that by making them only 1 CP each, so you can use more throughout the game. I think it's a great change that they've put here. If your army includes any Genestealer Cults detachments, then you get access to these stratagems. And here they are. Bore Through. This is one of my favourite ones. I think Bore Through is fantastic. 1 CP. Use the strat in the fight phase when a Genestealer Cult unit from your army fights. And until the end of the phase, each time they make an attack with an industrial weapon against an enemy monster or vehicle unit, you can re-roll the wound roll. So for 1 CP against enemy monster or vehicle units, you can re-roll your wound rolls. With industrial weapons, now industrial weapons are like heavy power weapons that aberrants have, heavy rock cutters and heavy rock saws that you can take on acolyte units, Atalan power weapons that you can take on your Atalan jackals. So there's quite a few units in your army that have industrial weapons, and you can tool for it. So, for example, heavy rock saws that you take on acolyte units are very good. They're like strength ×2, don't have any negative to hit, and they are -4 AP and flat 2 damage. Sorry, guys, need a quick sip of water there. But yeah, they're strength times 2, minus 4 AP, and flat 2 damage. So those kind of things are very good into monsters and vehicles when you consider the Acolyte to strength 4. So if you times 2, they're strength 8. There's no negative to hit on this weapon like there normally is on times 2 characteristic weapons. So they're just hitting on 3s or 2s, maybe rerolling 1s if you're in certain cults and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, they're wounding vehicles on 3s or 4s with full rerolls, and then they're minus 4 AP and flat 2 damage. Now, against minus 4 AP, most monsters and vehicles don't even get a save. So then you're just doing 2 wounds for each one that goes through, and you got 4 rerolls to wound. What a fantastic stratagem. That one's great. Helps you against big stuff. And, you know, Genestealer Cult have struggled against big stuff in the past sometimes. So being able to have that is very good. Rapid Advance. This is probably my favourite stratagem because, as you all know, my favourite unit in Tyranids is Genestealers. I think Genestealers are the coolest. And this is 1 command point, right? Use this stratagem in your movement phase when a Genestealer Cults Biker, or Genestealer Cults Vehicle unit from your army advances. So a Genestealer Cults Genestealer unit, that's like pure strain Genestealers. Use this stratagem when they advance. Do not make an advance roll. Instead, until the end of the phase, add 6 inches to the move characteristic of models in that unit. Now, you remember when I was saying there's that the upgrade that you can take, and we've got it right here that we just spoke about in the points paying section, the Proficient Planning abilities. Remember we said there was the they came from below for 10 points, where a Genestealer unit, if you used it on a Genestealer unit, when you reveal their ambush marker, they get to move 8 inches straight away. Well, then if you use this strat when they move in the movement phase after that, they go another 14 inches automatically because they advance 6. So they will have gone 8 and then 14. So that Genestealer unit from your front line can move 22 inches and then charge turn 1 for just 1 command point. I think that's incredible. So Rapid Advance, that's going to be a stratagem that you're gonna see be used a lot. 1 with the Shadows. This one's okay. Use it in your opponent's shooting phase when a Genestealer Cults infantry unit is chosen as a target of an attack. And until the end of the phase, if an attack is made against your ranged attack and you are receiving the benefits of cover, you add an additional 1 to any armor saving throw. This can be good against weight of fire if your opponent's not particularly got any AP, but it's a lot of weight of fire. For example, you could have an Aberrant unit because they've got 5 up armor saves. If they're getting cover, they'll have a 4 up armor save, and then this will give them a 3+ armor save. So if you get shot by high output, low AP weapons, then it can be quite good to use. I think 1 with the Shadows could be good on elite units, basically. Dig them out. I think this one is okay. Use this strat in your shooting phase when a Genestealer Cults unit from your army is selected to shoot, and until the end of the phase, each time a model in the unit makes an attack with an industrial weapon, the target unit within 12 inches, the target is treated as being exposed for that attack. So if you fire with industrial weapons like mining lasers and heavy mining lasers, then you can get +1 to hit and wound against a target for 1 command point. Overload fuel cells. This one's incredible, especially for combat. Not too much for shooting, but really good for combat. 1 CP. You use the strat in your shoot phase when you shoot, or in the fight phase when a Genestealer Cult unit fights. And until the end of the phase, each time an industrial weapon is selected. So you can see a theme here, like they're trying to force these, not force, but encourage people to take these industrial weapons by giving them loads of benefits. And I think it's a good way to go, because then your army will turn out to be more fluffy and it will follow the narrative a little bit more, which I think is quite cool. So until the end of the phase, each time an industrial weapon is selected for a model in the unit to attack with, the model can overload it. If it does so, then until that shooting or fight is resolved, each time the model makes an attack with that weapon, the following apply. So if it is a ranged weapon, you add 1 to the damage characteristic of that attack. Decent. If it is a melee weapon, you add 1 to the strength characteristic of that attack. That's huge, and I'll explain why in just a second. But if any unmodified hit rolls of 1/1 are made for attacks with that weapon, after the attacking model's unit has finished making its attacks, it suffers 1 mortal wound. So the model doesn't suffer a mortal wound. The attacking model's unit has finished making its attacks, it suffers 1 mortal wound. So the unit suffers 1 mortal wound, which is pretty good. It means you can choose who dies, which I think is quite good because you're paying a lot of points for these weapons. And obviously, there are ways of getting reroll 1s, which is going to be big when you're using a stratagem like this. But essentially, you can add 1 to the strength characteristic of melee attacks. So when you're attacking with these industrial weapons, you know, we're saying those Heavy rock swords are strength 8. Now imagine if you come up against an Imperial Knight, like a monster that's toughness 8, all of a sudden you can go, right, 1 CP, I'm going to be strength 9 with the 4 or 5 rock swords I've got in my unit. So I'm going to be strength 9 with them. And then for another CP, I'm going to reroll wound rolls. So you go, I'm going to be wounding even toughness 8 Imperial Knights on 3s with rerolls, not giving them a save and doing 2 damage on each one that goes through. That is very powerful. I really like that one. Monstrous Vigor is a survivable stratagem, helps your units be more resilient. It's 1 CP or 2 CP. Use this stratagem in any phase when an aberrant or abominant unit from your army is selected as the target of an attack. So it can only be used on aberrants and abominants. You can't use it on just anyone in your army. Until the end of the phase, each time an attack is made against that unit, an unmodified wound roll of 1 to 3 for that attack fails, irrespective of any abilities that the weapon or the model making the attack may have. So this is basically transhuman physiology for aberrants. If the unit contains 5 or fewer models, this stratagem costs 1 CP, otherwise it costs 2 CP. So exactly the same as the Marine one, and it can make aberrants really tough. Monstrous Vigor, that's called, so that's great. You got Raking Fire, which is okay. Not talk about that one much. Massed Firearms, also not that great. Hypermetabolism. This one I thought was really cool. You spend 1 CP, use this stratagem in your command phase. Select 1 Genestealer Cults character model from your army. That model regains up to D3 lost wounds. I think that's very powerful because, you know, we were talking about these combat characters that you can have. You can move forward. You can cast 2 smite power. Well, smite and the psionic blast, what is it called? Something like that. Basically, you can do the Genestealer Cult version of smite and your own smite. So you do 2d3 more wounds on someone, charge in there, do combat damage. They can hurt you back maybe, or maybe you kill the thing you go into. Then your opponent's turn, they come for you, they take 2-3 wounds off you, maybe even 4-5 if it's a Patriarch, and leave you really badly wounded with only 1 or 2 wounds remaining. For 1 CP, you can just heal D3 and carry on. I think that's very powerful as well. And also, if you have like a Magus in your army, I know they only have 3 or 4 wounds. So if he casts a power and then he perils and he's down to 1 or 2 wounds, the next turn in your command phase, you can heal D3 before casting more powers. So it stops you having that fear of, oh man, if I perils again, my model's dead. Well, no, you can heal it first. So I quite like that. It's nice. Rig to blow. Basically, you can auto-explode one of your vehicles. It's okay. Legendary Demise. I like this one, guys. It's 2 CP. Use this stratagem in any phase when a Kellamorph model from your army is destroyed by an enemy model. Do not remove that Kellamorph model from play. It can, after the attacking model's unit has finished making its attacks, shoot as if it were your shooting phase. After resolving these attacks, the destroyed Kellamorph model is then removed. So, when you finally get caught, when a Kellamorph finally gets caught and killed, it can just shoot for 2 CP. It's quite expensive, but it can shoot before it dies as though it's a shooting phase. And that's a very powerful ability. I like the idea of that. Could you imagine having that relic that we were speaking about with the worm rounds? I'm just going to quickly find it. The one that we were just talking about. Worm tooth rounds we're talking about for a Kellamorph. If you have that relic and you've got strength 6 -3 flat 3 damage shots, imagine shooting before you died. Just anything that lets you do something out of sequence is very powerful. And here you're shooting out of sequence before you die. I think that is very, very strong. Then you also have Jest Out Consciousness, which is 1 CP. Use this stratagem in your psychic phase when a cult psycho model from your army manifests a blessing psychic power that instructs you to select a friendly unit. When selecting a unit to be affected by that psychic power, you can select 1 friendly cult unit anywhere on the battlefield. That unit does not have to be visible or within any specified range of that psycho model. So now we were talking about, but it's only blessing, so you can't do it on ones that target the enemy like the fight last one. But you know we were talking about the what was it? Was it the strength from below? Was it might from beyond? Might from beyond that gives you +1 attack. Or psychic stimulus that lets you advance and charge. You can do that to a unit anywhere on the battlefield without being within 18 inches of your psyker, which I think is really good. Being able to just go, you know, because your opponent might think, oh, he's got to be within 18 inches to get the advance and charge. So if he's not in there, then I'm pretty safe. But then all of a sudden, you cast his power and a unit 30 inches away can advance and charge. I think that's going to catch some people. You can tell your opponent about this stratagem before the game, but I guarantee at some point in the game, it's going to catch them out. And it does say, when army manifests a blessing power. So you can wait till it manifested. You don't have to declare using this CP, then try and cast the power. You cast the power. Once it's manifested, then you decide if you're going to use this stratagem. You then have leaders of the cult. Now, this one, I'm not very happy about. I'm kind of happy, but not very happy about. So most armies have a stratagem now, most new books, where you can pay a CP and take extra warlord traits on different characters in your army. So you can have your warlord, then you can pay a CP and give a second character warlord trait, and pay another CP and give a third character warlord trait in Strike Force. You can normally use a stratagem twice. Now, this one, it saves your CP, but it also has a stipulation in place. So essentially, use this stratagem before the battle when you're mustering your army. If your warlord is a cult patriarch, so you can only use this stratagem if your warlord is a cult patriarch. So it's forcing you to have to take a patriarch. And I'll tell you why that's not so great in a minute. You select up to 2 other cult models with the HQ battlefield roll from your army and determine 1 warlord trait for each of them. That's incredible. Those models are only regarded as your warlord for the purpose of those models, for those warlord traits, and each warlord trait in your army must be unique, of course, and you can only use this stratagem once. So for 1 CP, you can get 2 additional warlord traits, which is very nice. But you can only use this stratagem if your warlord is a patriarch. So you can either have 3 warlord traits in your army, the one on your patriarch for free, and then 2 more for 1 CP. You can either have 3 warlord traits in your army, or you can have 1. Because if you don't have a patriarch, you're not allowed to buy any other warlord traits, which I think is very limited. You have also got Genesire's Gifts, which is a 1 CP stratagem where you can give, if your warlord is Genestealer Cults, you can take an extra relic. Pretty much everybody has that. So that's pretty good. Good ones after that. You then have Genetic Lineage, and this one's called Genetic Lineage. 1 CP. Use this stratagem in your charge phase. Select 1 Acolyte Hybrid or Hybrid Metamorphs unit from your army. Until the end of the turn, that unit is eligible to charge in a turn in which it advanced. So you can advance and charge on Acolytes or Hybrid Metamorphs, which is very powerful indeed when they're mainly combat orientated. And, you've got Genestealers that can already advance and charge and move automatically 6 inches. Now you've got acolytes and hybrids that can advance and charge. So you can see that the army is fairly fast-paced. It's tricksy, fast-paced, can get to combat very quickly and reliably. So I really like that one. Then other good ones. Return to the Shadows. This, in my opinion, is the best stratagem that you have. I think it's incredible. Return to the Shadows. Use this stratagem in your movement phase. When a Genestealer Cults infantry unit from your army, just a Genestealer Cults infantry, can be any, from your army is selected to move, or in your fight phase after they have resolved all of their attacks, but before they have consolidated. If the unit is more than 6 inches away from any enemy unit, so it has to charge and kill a unit basically. So if it's more than 6 inches away from any enemy units, remove it from the battlefield. In the reinforcement step of your next movement phase, set that unit back up on the battlefield anywhere that is more than 9 inches away from any enemy models. If the battle ends and the unit is not on the battlefield, it is destroyed. But essentially, you can charge in, kill a unit, and then if for example, if you're trading with your opponent out in the open and they've got a unit that's not hidden, it's out in the open, and they want you to charge it so that they can shoot your unit and kill it because it's out in the open, what you can do is you can always trade up in that situation. You can run in, you can charge that unit, wipe that unit out and go, right, now I'm just standing here out in the open. So instead of consolidating, I'm going to spend a CP and go back into reserves, and then I'm going to come on next turn 9 inches away and do some more stuff. Or you can use it to do actions. You can have like a 5-man acolyte unit that's just, so for example, it's come on a difficult quarter for you to just walk into, and then it's done retrieve Octarius data, and then the next turn you can spend a CP and put it back into the shadows, and it can come on the following turn and do an action in a different quarter. So it's very useful and tricksy for 1 CP. I think that follows the theme of the army very, very well. You've also got Covering Fire. You can use this stratagem in your charge phase, and you can select an enemy unit that has a Crossfire marker on it, and until the end of the turn, the unit cannot fire Overwatch, set to defend, or perform heroic interventions. Very powerful. It can stop people doing things. I like that. And then the other one that I really, really like, and it's just here, Coordinated Assault. That one, I think that's really cool. 1 command point. Use this stratagem at the start of the fight phase. So you're going to use the start of the fight phase. Select one enemy unit that has a Crossfire marker and is within engagement range of any Genestealer Cult units from your army. Any Genestealer Cult units. Until the end of the phase, that enemy unit is not eligible to fight until after all eligible units from your army have done so. So you make a unit fight last with this command point. So imagine now, you can charge in 3 different places with Genestealer Cult. And normally, quite a lot of the combat armies are struggling because when they charge you, and they charge with 2 units, they get to fight with 1, but then you interrupt and kill their other one, so they find themselves in bad situations. Combat armies do quite a lot. Well, with this, you've got the psychic power, that's can stop people heroically intervening, fighting next. It makes them fight last in the fight phase. Broodmind Discipline, Mass Hypnosis. So if you can cast Mass Hypnosis on somebody, you make them fight last. You can also do Coordinated Assault for 1 CP and make another unit fight last, and then one of your units can fight first anyway. So if you charge in 3 different places, say, you can fight with this unit, make this one fight last with a power, and make this one fight last with a stratagem. So you can fight first in all 3 places, and then your opponent gets to swing back. Very, very powerful for a combat army. And there was one more that I wanted to talk about. Oh, yes, it's this one. Roaming Engagement. It's quite good. 2 CPs. Use this stratagem in your shooting phase after making attacks with an Atalan or Achilles Ridge Runners unit from your army. That unit can make a normal move of up to 7 inches if it were your movement phase. Until the end of the turn, that unit is not eligible to declare a charge with. So it's basically Fire and Fade, but for Atalan Jackals and Achilles Ridge Runners. I quite like that because Ridge Runners are very, fragile. They're not very tough. So to have them be able to move out, shoot something, and then hide again, I think that might make them playable. Other than that, they're not very useful, I don't think. And Atalan Jackals move very quick anyway, so if you need them to get to the other side of the board to get you a secondary like Engage on all fronts, or steal a primary objective off your opponent, then you can always move them 14 inches, shoot them, and then move them another 7 inches. That's a very powerful ability to have there. So that's what the stratagems are doing. Let's have a look at the different cults and what they give you. So when it comes to cults, guys, I think there are some obvious choices that are better than the rest. So first of all, there are like six set cults, actual Genestealer Cult cults. And the first one of them is the Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor. Now, this is one of the ones to consider, mainly because their cult creed is Subterranean Ambushes. So if your entire detachment is Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, then you get Subterranean Ambushes. And units can re-roll charge rolls. And also, each time a ranged attack is made against a unit with this creed, if the attacker is more than 12 inches away, then the unit with this creed is treated as having the benefits of light cover against that attack. So you get +1 to your save if you're shot from outside of 12 inches, which is okay. You don't have the best saves in the world anyway, so don't think that's that big. You're going to want to be out of line of sight for as long as possible. But re-rolling charge rolls is very good. So these units can basically reroll their charge rolls, and that's why you would take Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor. The Warlord trait is also very good. Inscrutable Cunning. I cannot stress to you, I keep saying it over and over again, but stratagems and command points are the key way of doing well with Genestealer cults because they're very tricksy and they give you options in the game. And this Warlord trait really helps that. Once per battle round, so every battle round, once per battle round, when you use a Genestealer cult strategic ploy or battle tactic stratagem, if that stratagem is used on a Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor unit within 12 of your Warlord, you can reduce the CP cost of the stratagem by 1 to a minimum of 0. So you can drop a 1 CP strat to 0 CP every battle round, which I think, with the amount of stratagems that we've just gone through and how many of them were good, I think that's going to be very useful. And as you saw, man, like some armies have 2, maybe 3 stratagems that they use, on a regular basis. This army's got like 10 that you want to use. So I think having some of them go down to 0 CP and 1 CP from 2 is very big. And of course, they've got a plan, Generations in the Making, which they've always had. And it's followed Vect in the same way that the Drakari one. So Agents of Vect went the same way, and now they've done the exact same thing as they did with Agents of Vect when they've given them their new book. So it's gone from 3 CPs to 0 CPs. Before it was 3 CP, and when your opponent used a stratagem, you could spend the 3 CPs and roll a d6, and on a 2+ basically, that stratagem was wasted. It didn't work. They were not allowed to use it. So that was very big. And now it's changed. It's 0 CP, so you can use it for free, and use this stratagem after your opponent uses a stratagem, excluding the command reroll. So any stratagem but the command reroll, and until the end of the battle, so it lasts for the rest of the game, the CP cost your opponent must pay to use that stratagem again is increased by 1. And you can only use this stratagem once. So basically, when your opponent goes to use that one key stratagem in their army that you think they'll use most of the game, if it's 1 CP, next time they want to cast it, it goes to 2 CP. And if it's 2 CP, the next time they want to cast it, it then goes to 3 CP. Sorry, it only goes up by 1. So, for example, if they use a stratagem which normally costs them 2 CP, that would then go up to 3 CP for any future times they wanted to use it. So the value only goes up by 1. It doesn't go up by 1 every single time. It just goes up by 1, and every time they want to use it, they have to pay that 1 extra CP every single time, which is very big. The relic is the Sword of the Four-Armed Emperor, which is pretty pants, and their psychic power is Undermine, which is very good. It slows down the enemy. So it's cast on a 7. Again, the crouchling is important if you want this character to cast that. You select an enemy unit other than one that can fly within 18 inches and visible to the Psyker. And then until the start of your next psychic phase, you subtract 3 inches from the move characteristic of models in that unit. You halve advance rolls made for that unit, and you subtract 2 from charge rolls made for that unit. So you -3 off their move, half their advances, and -2 off their charge. Very powerful power there. So this cult is actually pretty decent. I would recommend having a look into it. The next one is the Hive Cult, which I don't really think is that great. It's better for shooting armies, but I think Genestealer Cult is mainly going to be a combat army. If you want to use them competitively, I think they're going to be a combat army. The Pauper Princes are next, and these ones I think are the best cult generically. So their cult creed is Devoted Zealots. Each time a model with this creed makes a melee attack, if the model's unit made a charge move, was charged, or performed a heroic intervention this turn, add 1 to that attack's hit roll. So if they charge, get charged, or they heroically intervene, they get +1 to hit. And most things in this army hit on 3s in combat anyway, so you're going to be hitting on 2s if you were charged, or performed a heroic intervention. And I think that's very big, especially if you use that Warlord trait we were talking about, where every unit within 6 inches of your Warlord can heroically intervene. Oh man, I think it's going to be very powerful. The Warlord trait, it's okay. Zenith Prophet. Each time you make an unquestioning loyalty test after a saving throw made for this Warlord is failed, do not roll the dice, it is automatically passed. That can be quite nice. So you could do this on a... it's every saving throw. It's pretty good. So you could do this on a Patriarch, and he could go in, hit very hard in combat, and then all of a sudden they try and kill him, and he can just pass wounds off to people behind him for as long as he really wants to. So that's pretty cool. But also, each time a saving throw made for this Warlord is failed, for the purposes of the Unquestioning Loyalty ability, you can select one other friendly Pauper Princes or Brood Brothers model with that ability within 6 inches of this Warlord instead of 3 inches. So models within 6 inches can take wounds for him, not just 3 inches. And also, while a friendly Pauper Prince's core unit is within 6 inches of this Warlord, models in that unit can use this model's leadership characteristic instead of their own. Again, very powerful. I think I like it as a Warlord trait. It's quite good, and it can get you out of some sticky situations, but also it means that you can go in there and tie units up with your Warlord, units that you know can't fall back and charge. You can tie them up, and then they've got to hit your Warlord. He can pass wounds off, and he can sit there for as long as he wants. Their relic is also the most powerful relic in the book, in my opinion. Pauper Prince's model only. The bearer has the following ability: Reliquary of Saint Tendark. It's an aura. While a friendly Pauper Prince's core unit, so only works on core, but while a friendly Pauper Prince's core unit is within 6 inches of the bearer, models in that unit have a 5+ invulnerable save. So you can give all of your acolytes and stuff like that within 6 inches of your Warlord, 6 inches of the bearer of this relic, a 5+ invulnerable save. That's just so powerful. How many points would you pay for every troop in your army to have a 5+ invulnerable? All you got to do here is buy a relic and keep them within 6 inches of him. I think that's very good. Their stratagem is not very great. We don't need to talk about that. The psychic power Last Gasp is okay. So it's cast on a 7 and you choose a friendly Pauper Prince's core unit within 18 inches and visible to the Psyker. Got to be core again. Until the end of your next psychic phase, start of your next psychic phase, sorry. Each time a model in the unit is destroyed by a melee attack, you roll a dice, and on a 5+, the enemy unit that's killed that model takes a mortal wound. A maximum of 5 mortal wounds per phase as a result of this psychic power can be inflicted. So imagine that, man. Like, you cast this on one of your units, and then as your opponent tries to kill them in combat, they take mortal wounds while they die, so they kind of kill themselves off as they go. So the Pauper Prince is definitely there. They've got the best creed, a great warlord trait, the best relic in the book, and a decent psychic power. I genuinely think Pauper Prince is the best one if you're going to take one of the book-specific ones. Rusted Claw, again, I don't think is very great. We don't need to talk about it. The Bladed Cog, situational. It gives models a 6+ invulnerable save. That's pretty nice. Everything else is a bit meh in their detachment, their psychic power and all that. Their stratagem is big. If you're going to go aberrant heavy, like 30 aberrants, if you're going to go aberrant heavy, and you don't mind about CPs, then you're going to want to, have this stratagem, and you can spend 2 CPs for each aberrant unit in your army and start them off in the game with a 5-up invulnerable save. Having like 30 aberrants all with 5-up invulnerables, maybe worth 6 CP, but that's the trade you've got to consider. So I think Bladed Cog are very situational and list specific. Twisted Helix is the final one I want to talk about. Now, they don't really have a great psychic power or stratagem or anything like that. The stratagem only works on aberrants or abominants, so it's like, okay, fine. But they have a good warlord trait and a good creed. Now, the warlord trait is Bioalchemist. You can add one to the damage characteristic of melee weapons this warlord is equipped with. So if you have like a patriarch, you can go to flat 3 damage, which is very nice. But also, they're called creed. It's called experimental subjects. As this is nice. Add one to the strength characteristic of models with this creed. Add 1 inch to the move characteristic of models with this creed. And each time an attack is made against a unit with this creed, an unmodified wound roll of a 1 or a 2 always fails, irrespective of any abilities that the weapon or the attacker may have. So it's like a baby transhuman. Wound rolls of 1 and 2 always fail. You get 1 inch extra on your move and 1 inch plus 1 strength. I think that it's like 3 abilities rolled into 1, and all of them are very good. So Twisted Helix do have a very good cult creed, and their warlord trait is great. So that's why I wanted to talk about them. So that's the cults there. There are myriad cults. That's the next section. But that's like you making your own cults, and basically what they've done is they've taken the traits, the cult creeds of all the other cults that they've got there, and they've kind of split them. So the way it works is every single myriad cult you can make between, but you cannot exceed a value of 4, and all of these cults have got a value next to them for what you can spend on them. And it's pretty good, but like the good ones are, of course, reroll charge rolls, which is Hunter's Instinct, and Impassioned, which is the one where every time you make a melee attack, if you were charged, perform heroic intervention, you get +1 to hit, which is like half of the Pauper Prince's one. But those 2 are 3 each, so you can only pair them with one that's worth 1. Now, the only way I can see this being good is if you use Impassion, so you get the +1 to hit, like we were saying, if you were charged, or performed a heroic intervention. And then if you use that with Industrial Affinity, which is each time a model with this creed makes an attack with an industrial weapon, you can ignore any or all hit roll, ballistic skill, and weapon skill modifiers. So you can keep your +1 for attacking in combat, and then choose to ignore all negatives. So that could be very good, because it means that you'll probably, with your industrial weapons, you'll always be hitting on a 2+ against the enemy. That's the only like myriad make your own cult that I can see being good. Right, so that's all the juicy stuff got in the book. Now let's have a look at the data sheets and have a look which units are going to benefit from which abilities, and which of the stratagems that we talked about we can link to these data sheets. So in this final section here, we're going to look at the data sheets and which ones are really good. So first of all, there are some abilities on the data sheets. The main one is in Conceal. Anybody that has Conceal, during deployment, you can set them up in ambush, or you can put them underground if they're infantry or biker unit. Now, ambush is when you put them in an ambush marker, and basically they're deployed on the battlefield, but they're hidden in markers, and then you reveal ambush markers at certain times, depending on who's going first. So you can do that with units in your army. Now, pretty much everybody has conceal. So you can basically deploy like your whole army hidden in little markers and nobody knows what units are where, which is very, very good. And then like half your units can be underground, which is also very good. And underground, if you have units that are underground, then in the reinforcement step of your movement phase, you can set up the units in one of the following ways. So you can either set up this unit anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 6 inches away from any enemy models, but they cannot declare a charge this turn. So you come in 6 away and shoot, but you can't declare charges. That could be situationally great to do things like, if your opponent screens 9 inches off because they know that you're going to come in to try and charge them, when they think that you are, you can come in 6 inches away and do an action, maybe in their deployment zone. So that's very powerful. But also, or you can set up this unit anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 8 inches away from any enemy model. So instead of 9 inches, that normally it is when you come in from reinforcements, it's 8 inches. So your charges are slightly easier. You've got to make 8-inch charges instead of 9-inch charges, which will make a big difference. If a unit set up underground has any abilities that are used in your command phase, e.g. Meticulous Planner, then the first time that unit is set up on the battlefield, it can use any or all of those abilities as if it were your command phase. Wow! So if you have characters that are underground, when they arrive on the battlefield, then, and this is at the end of one of your movement phases, then they can use their command phase abilities, which I think is very powerful. That's really cool, actually. Units set up underground are considered to be set up in a location other than the battlefield. Therefore, they must be determined in the declare reserve set of your step of your game. So when you declare what's in reserve, you've got to declare everybody that's set up underground. That's pretty cool. And then revealing ambush markers is done in the same way as before. If you have the first turn, you do them in your command phase, and if you don't have the first turn, then it's at the end of your opponent's first movement phase that you must reveal all of your ambush markers. So, and they're, you set up in the same way as you did in the old codex. Nothing there has changed really. So the actual data sheets. First of all, we've got a Patriarch. Now, I was quite disappointed with the Patriarch. Yeah, let's get these notes out. My first reaction was that he's pretty terrible. He's not that good at all. But when you consider you could take some Warlord traits on him to make him a little bit killier, he's the only way that you can take extra Warlord traits in your army, which can be very big. It's a bit weird, man. Like, I'm not sure if he's worth 140 points. Like, he's the same points as like 2 other characters. So I don't know if he's worth it because he doesn't really buff anybody anymore. He has Conceal, cool, that benefits himself. He can declare charges when he advances. Again, that benefits himself. And he has a 4-up Inven. Benefits himself. He has Living Idol, so cult units that are within 6 inches do not suffer any modifiers. You can ignore all modifiers when taking combat attrition tests. So that's the only buff for other people, which is a bit crap, really. And he can cast 2 powers. Casting 2 powers is very good. So he's the guy that you probably want to cast Psionic Blast with and then Smite. So he can do 2d3 more wounds and then charge someone. But in combat, I think he's gotten worse than he was in the last book. So he's got 6 attacks and he hits on 2s, which is fairly decent. And then he is Strength 5, so that's gone down. He's Strength 5, -3, 2 damage. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, you can reroll the wound roll. So you can reroll wounds, that's very good. On an unmodified wound roll of a 6, the attack has an AP characteristic of -6 and a damage characteristic of 3. So he's -3, 2 damage, but every time he rolls a 6 to wound, he's -6 and he's 3 damage. That's pretty nice. I do like that. But there are better combat characters out there, like a Succubus. A Succubus who is 80 points would do way more damage than this Patriarch can do. And she's 80 points. So I'm not sure if it's worth it for that. But one thing that has made me see a little bit differently about it is comparing him to a Magus. Because a Magus is not great in combat at all. You're taking a Magus just because a Magus can cast 2 powers, right? And a Magus is 80 points. So you're like, okay. Well, a Magus is 80 points, can do 2 powers. There are 4 powers that are very good, so essentially I want to be taking 2 Magus in my army. Now, I can't take a second Magus in the same detachment, so that's going to cost me CPs. And also, I won't be able to take any extra Warlord traits if there's no Patriarch in my army. But if you look at it that way and you go, right, a Patriarch is actually only 60 more than a Magus. So if you kind of look at it that way and go, then a Patriarch can be in the same detachment as the Magus, that saves me command points. I can then spend 1 CP and get 2 additional Warlord traits in my army. And essentially, I'm paying 60 points on top of a Magus for the combat potential of a Patriarch. If you look at it that way, then it's not so bad. Like, I don't think he's fantastic, but he may be worth his points if you look at it in that context. So that's a Patriarch for you. Then we go on to a Primus. Now, I think a Primus is a must-take. You've got to take a Primus. He's 80 points. He's fairly decent in combat. He's got 4 attacks. He hits on 2s. He's strength 5 minus 2 damage. So even he can, bat stuff away if it gets too close. But you're mainly taking him for his aura and his meticulous planner ability. So he's got an aura called Cult Demagogue. While a friendly cult core unit is within 6 inches of this model, each time modeling the unit makes an attack, you can re-roll a hit roll over 1. So remember how I was saying Pauper Princes are the best ones because it makes all your acolytes, your metamorphs hit on 2s? Well, if they're near this guy, they're hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. So for 80 points, a Primus that can do that is fantastic. But also, that's not his only ability. In his command phase, you can also select a friendly cult core unit within 9 inches of him, and until the start of your next command phase, they can also reroll wound rolls of 1. But obviously, you select 1 unit. So he has an aura that gives every unit reroll 1s to hit, and he can also select a unit and they get reroll 1s to wound. Man, a Primus is great. You got to take a Primus. The next character is an Acolyte Icon Ward, and I don't think you want to play the game without him. I think he's very powerful. So his main ability is Nexus of Devotion. In your command phase, and bear in mind, guys, he's 75 points. 75 points. And look what he's about to do. In your command phase, if a friendly cult core unit is within 6 inches of this model, so any cult unit, and it doesn't say select one, it says if a friendly cult core unit is within 6 inches of this model, that unit can summon the cult. So if you have 10 core units within 6 inches of this model, every single one of those 10 units can all summon the cult. And the way summoning a cult works is if you're a neophyte unit, you can roll a d6, and that many neophytes are returned back to your squad. But if you're any other core unit, so you can't do this on Aberrants or Pure Strain Genestealers, it's got to be core units. But if you're any of the core unit, like Acolytes, Hybrid Metamorphs, then you can return D3 models back to your unit. So that's very big, man. Returning D6 Neophytes to every unit within 6 of him, and D3 Acolytes and Jackals and Metamorph Hybrids. All of these units within 6 inches of them heal D6 or D3 wounds, depending on who they are. He can earn his points back potentially in 1 turn, and then whatever he does for the rest of the game is all benefit. So I think he's incredible just for that. I would take an Acolyte Icon Ward just for that one ability that he has. But he's got another one, and this is great too. This model can perform the following action at the end of the move unit step of your movement phase, so before reinforcement, so you can't come on from reserve and do it. But at the end of the move unit step of your movement phase, you can do an action with this model, and it's completed at the start of your charge phase. And if it's successfully completed, then they gain the following aura, Sacred Cult Banner. While a friendly cult infantry, so not cult core, cult infantry, so this does work on Aberrants and Pure Strain Genestealers. While a friendly cult infantry, cult biker, or cult character unit, excluding a Genestealer unit, so it doesn't work on Pure Strain Genestealers, but it will work on Aberrants, is within 6 inches of this model, add 1 to charge rolls made for that unit. So you can get +1 to charges. Now, if this character moves up the board, then starts this action, so moves up the board, starts his action, and then all of a sudden, these very powerful units start coming in from reserve 8 inches away from your opponent now, not 9, 8 inches away, and then they get +1 to their charge, and they're all charging the 7 inches from reserve. I think that's an incredible ability. So the Acolyte Icon Ward gives you 2 abilities that are just, each one of them is worth like 80 points, and the character himself is only worth 75. So I would 100% be taking an Acolyte Icon Ward. Jackal Alphas, nothing special, wouldn't really recommend him. A Magus, like I said before, you just want to take a Magus because you don't really want to take 2 Patriarchs in your army. You've got to take them in different detachments, and there are a lot of points. 1 Patriarch and 1 Magus is very good because it gives you access to all 4 powers that you want. And then the Magus can just cast 2 powers a turn for 80 points, which is worth it. But also, if a cult infantry or biker unit is within 6 inches of this model, and they take mortal wounds as a result of psychic, if they take mortal wounds in the psychic phase, then they roll a dice on a 5+, they don't take those wounds. So a Magus is actually very, very much a bargain for her points. So after a Magus, we're on to the troops. Now, Neophyte hybrids, I think they're well overrated. these aren't the things that you really want to be taking in your army. Now, there's a small misprint. On their datasheet, it says they're units of 10 to 20. But in the back where it says their points values, it says you could take units of 5 to 15. Now, if you could take a 5-man unit of neophytes, they're 30 points. Having a 30-point OBSEC troop unit would be incredible, but I think their data sheet is the one that it's supposed to be. I think they've made a mistake in the back of the book on the points value. So I would go by the data sheet, guys, until told otherwise. So they have to be units of 10 and then 60 points. You're basically paying 60 points for a guardsman. I don't think it's worth it. Then, people say you could put mining lasers on them, webbers on them, make them really actually good at shooting. But then all of a sudden you've got 1-shot mining laser in the squad, or 2-shot mining lasers in the squad, and you've got 2 webbers in the squad, but your unit's like 100 points or more than 100 points, but your toughness 3 with 1 wound each and a 5-up armor save. I really don't think neophytes are the way that you want to be going with your troops, to be honest with you. I think you take as many acolytes as you can, and neophytes are pretty overrated. Acolytes are better, even if you want like small units that you might think, neophytes are really good actually for going and doing actions because they're so cheap and sitting on backfield objectives. But actually, acolytes, a 5-man unit of acolytes is only 45 points. So if you're looking to do that with cheap units, acolytes are better because you can take smaller 5-man units, and that 5-man unit will probably do a lot more damage in combat than 10 neophytes. So acolytes are the way you want to go, guys. Here are acolytes. They're 9 points a model. They're web skill 3+. They've gained their strength 4. They've gained a point of toughness. They've gone to toughness 4 as well, and they have a 5-up save now, which is pretty good. They have 2 attacks each base, and they get +1 attack with their cult claws and knife on their fights. They get 3 attacks each. And cult claws and knife are actually very good. They're strength user, so strength 4 now. They've gone from -1 to -2, and you make an additional attack with them. They are 1 damage though. So they get 3 attacks each at strength 4, -2, 1 damage. Very powerful for your basic troop unit. I think that's very, very powerful. And then you can, for every 5 models in the unit, you can take 2 special weapons. So obviously you can take cult icons. So in your command phase, if this unit contains a model with a cult icon, it can summon the cult. So if you've got a cult icon, you can heal D3 models, and then if you've got an acolyte icon ward next to you, you can heal D3 models. So you can heal up to 2 D3 models, but you can't go past a maximum of 3. It's a maximum of 3 models can be healed a turn, but that basically reliably gets you 3 models back per turn. But a cult icon is 20 points, fairly expensive. But other than a cult icon, you can do other things. You can have heavy rock saws. Heavy rock saws, I think, are great. You can have heavy rock cutters, which are -4 AP and flat 3 damage. But you have to subtract 1 from your hit roll when you attack with them. However, heavy rock saws are strength ×2 -4, and they're 2 damage. So they're 1 less damage, but you don't have to subtract 1 from your hit roll, which I think I would prefer, to be honest. You don't know how many 2s can be rolled in a game. So I think heavy rock saw acolytes are the way forward with your acolytes. Then we've got aberrants. Now, aberrants are okay. Hear me out. People are going to say, what? They're bonkers. Well, they're okay. They're okay. They don't hit like a ton of bricks like they used to anymore. They have been nerfed in a big way with their damage output, but they are very survivable. Very survivable. So they get 2 attacks each, and they are strength 8 -2 flat 3 damage. So strength 8 -2 flat 3 damage. That's a very good profile, but they have 2 attacks each that hit on 3s. And that is all they do now, combat-wise. So that isn't that big. Of course, you can buff them with the power. You can give them 3 attacks each. If you take them in Pauper Princes, then they get +1 to hits. They hit on 2s in combat. That then starts to make them actually fairly decent with their output. But it's their survivability you're taking them for. They are toughness 5 with 3 wounds a model. Toughness 5 with 3 wounds a model, and they have the Bestial Vigor rule, where each time an attack is allocated to a model in this unit, you can subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of that attack to a minimum of 1. So they're toughness 5, they have 3 wounds each, and they can reduce damage by 1, which is very big. And then there is a Biophagus that can help them out and give them some buffs, and we're going to talk about that Biophagus right now. So a Biophagus is a must-take, I think, especially if you are going to take aberrants in your army. Now, Biophagus, he's got this table. It's called the Genomic Enhancement Table. So we were saying you can buy that 15-point upgrade, the Master of something that we spoke about at the start. It is called Alchemist Supreme. So you could do Alchemist Supreme, and one unit. If you give that to a Biophagus for 15 points, then one unit in your army can start with a genomic enhancement. So, and the genomic enhancements are very good. And then he can do an action every movement phase, and you can choose a cult core or a cult aberrant unit within 3 inches of him. And when he successfully completes that action, then that unit gets a genomic enhancement. And obviously, it can't be a unit that's already got a genomic enhancement. Every unit can only be, affected by this once, but basically the one unit can start the game with one of these, and then from turn 1 you can put it on the second unit, third unit, fourth unit, like that, and so on, and they're very good. So a 1, it's a D3 chart, and you have to roll, and this is key, you have to roll, but if you have an aberrant unit that you've given an enhancement to, they can choose, so it's very good. Each time a model in this unit makes a melee attack, improve the AP by 1. So that's the first enhancement. The second enhancement, each time a model in this unit makes a melee attack, an unmodified hit roll of a 6 scores an additional hit. So get exploding 6s in combat, which is very powerful. But the third one is what you want for Aberrant, enhanced resilience. Each time a model in this unit would lose a wound, roll 1d6. On a 5+, that wound is not lost. So not only are they T5 with 3 wounds each, reducing damage by 1, but they now also have a 5+ feel no pain. That makes Aberrants absolutely bonkers, and the Biophagus is only 55 points with that upgrade. So if you buy that upgrade, an Aberrant unit can start the game with -1 damage and a 5 feel no pain, and in turn 1 you could give it to another Aberrant unit, and you can have 20 Aberrants from turn 1 with -1 damage and a 5 feel no pain. How bonkers is that for a 55-point character? So after a Biophagus, guys, you also have an Abominant. Now him as well, you only want to take him if you're going Aberrant heavy, because basically his main ability is the Chosen One, which is really quite cool. While a friendly cult aberrant unit is within 6 inches of this model, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, you can re-roll the hit roll. So they've only got 2 attacks each, and they hit on 3s, but they're flat 3 damage. Now the way to get as many through is by giving them full rerolls to hit. So an Abominant is actually quite good with a unit of aberrants, but you only want to take him if you've got loads of aberrants in your army, because he's 95 points. So taking a 95-point character, I mean, he's okay in combat. Okay, he's not great. He's okay in combat. The main reason you are taking him is literally for this ability, the Chosen One, and that is to give rerolls to hit to aberrant units. So it's only worth it if you're going to take 20 or 30 aberrants in your army. Otherwise, you're paying 100 points of a character to not really do much. And, if you're Pauper Princes as well, then your Aberrant's already hitting on 2, so maybe you don't even need him. So the Abominant, like I say, Aberrants are great, and you can make them even better, and you can make their damage potential good by taking a Biophagus and an Abominant. A Biophagus I would take anyway, because you can buff all cult units, all cult core units, but an Abominant I would really only take if you're going to take 20+ Aberrants, so he's not that great. A Kenomorph. Now, a Kenomorph is fantastic. 80 points. And he's got those Liberator auto stubs that we talked about. And the Liberator auto stubs are 2 shots each, strength 5 -1/1 damage. 18-inch range, and they can target characters. And every wound roll of a 6 is a mortal wound. So it's 6 shots, strength 5 -1/1 damage. But remember, instead of 6 shots, you can fire 3 shots if you've given him the relic, the worm tooth rounds. I keep forgetting it. It keeps going to mind. The worm tooth rounds, if you give him that relic, then he can fire 3 shots instead of 6, but they're strength 6 -3/3 damage. Very, very powerful. And his main ability is Gunslinger, and this is why the relic is so good with him. Each time this model makes a ranged attack, if a hit is scored, after this model makes the rest of its ranged attacks, this model can make 1 additional ranged attack against the same target using the same weapon. So that's for each weapon. This additional range attack cannot generate any further attacks. So each time a hit is scored, you can make an extra attack, but you can't then generate any further. So if he's got 6 shots, if he gets 6 hits, he gets 6 more shots. So that's fantastic. You get up to 12 shots at strength 5 -1/1 damage, but remember, you're firing 3 shots at strength 6 -3/3 damage. He could get another 3 shots. If all 3 of those shots hit, he gets another 3 shots at strength 6 -3/3 damage. So imagine having 6 shots on a little character that hits on 2s. Imagine having 6 shots that are strength 6 -3 flat 3 damage. You could do a lot of damage with that, and he's only 80 points. But he's got a fantastic ability. and it's called hypersensory abilities. In your shooting phase, after this model shoots, it can make a normal move or fall back as if it were your movement phase, even if it arrived as reinforcements this turn. So he can come on from underground and be just within 18 inches of the unit he wants to shoot them, and then move 6 inches away, so he can go like 24 inches. But basically, every turn he can move out, shoot, and hide again, move out, shoot, and hide again, which is very powerful. Or because his profile is pistol, he can shoot in combat and then fall back. Oh man, I think he's a great character. So I think just for that, he's definitely worth taking, and he's got a 5-up invulnerable save. So you definitely want a Kelemorph in your army. Now, there's only a couple of other units that I want to talk about, because the rest of it is all like the other characters that you want to take are all personal preference, other than a Nexos. I think a Nexos is the one that you want to take. Remember the Cranial Relic that we talked about? The one that lets you regen CPs on a 5+? Only a Nexos can take that. So you definitely want him just for that, even if you take it. The Cranial Inlay. So every time you use a stratagem on a 5-up, you get a CP back. So I think you take a Nexos for 50 points and buy him that relic just for that ability to get CPs back on a 5-up. But also, remember, he gets to use that strategic coordination ability twice, where he can pick 2 units anywhere on the battlefield. So you can pick 2 units anywhere on the battlefield, and they count as being within range of the aura abilities of a Primus or a Jackal Alphus or a Clamorous that's within 6 of your Nexos. So it's like board-wide aura for 2 units. Fantastic. But also, he's got another ability, the Battlefield Analysis. In your command phase, if this model is on the battlefield, you select one enemy unit on the battlefield, that unit gains a Crossfire marker. That's huge. So you just pick a unit on the board in your command phase and they gain a Crossfire marker. Now, this is incredible with those stratagems. Remember we were saying when you charge a unit in the fight phase, you can make a unit with a Crossfire marker on them fight last. Man, the Nexus is the perfect way to do it. You go, that unit that I'm going to charge this turn in the command phase, right, I'm going to put a Crossfire marker on them. So when I charge them in the fight phase, I can then make them fight last. Automatic as well. There's no roll for it. There's no CP cost. He just does it. So I think a Nexus for 50 points with that relic, the amount of rules he's giving you there, it would be silly not to take a Nexus. He's 100% a unit that you take. Right, so after the Nexus, there aren't too many of the units that I want to talk to you about, to be honest, because we've covered the main ones, like Aberrants, Acolytes, all the characters that you get. Those are definitely like the main core of your army. But there are 2 or 3 more units that I think can be very good in your army. Hybrid Metamorphs is one, incredible. Remember, you've got that stratagem to make Acolyte or Hybrid Metamorphs advance and charge. Now, the difference between Metamorphs and Acolytes is fairly significant as well. Now, the Hybrid Metamorphs are elites, so they don't take away from your troops cap. You can take as many Acolytes as you want and then have some Metamorphs in your elite slots, and they're fantastic. So they're 3 points more than an Acolyte, but when you start putting Rock Swords in Acolyte units so they can do damage, then they become about the same, to be honest. Hybrid Metamorphs are only 12 points a model, and they get, instead of 2 attacks each, they got 3 attacks each. So I know Acolytes also make 3 attacks when they fight with their Cult Knife and Claw, so they got 3 attacks each, both units. But this unit, instead of being Strength 4 -2 1 damage, they're actually Strength 5 -3 1 damage. So they've got an extra strength and an extra AP for 3 points. I think that's fantastic. So they're basically just better Acolytes in combat. So I think you're definitely going to want to have a few units of Hybrid Metamorphs in your army. And they also have the Savage Amalgam ability. Each time a model in this unit is destroyed by a melee attack, if that model has not yet fought, do not remove it from play. The destroyed model can fight after the attacking model's unit has finished making attacks. And after doing so, you then destroy this model. So basically, they can fight in death if they haven't already fought. I would 100%, you basically, think of it this way. You've got an Acolyte unit. You're paying 1 point for an extra point of strength, 1 point for an extra point of AP, and 1 point to fight in death if you haven't already fought this phase. I think that's fantastic. So they allow you, even if you don't have the ability to fight last, they let you fight in 3 different places because you charge 3 different units. So you charge 1 unit, you can put a Crossfire and you fight there first. you've put a Crossfire marker on one unit with a Nexus and you're making them fight last for a CP. And then over here, if your opponent interrupts and kills your hybrid metamorphs, you fight in death and kill them anyway, and you're not paying any CPs. You're just fighting in death. So I think hybrid metamorphs, man, you'd be silly to not include at least two units in your army, 1 or 2 units. Even if they're little 5-man units hiding on objectives and someone comes to dig them in and hit them in combat, you then just fight on death and take the unit with you. So I think they're very, very powerful for that. Right, so that's what hybrid metamorphs do. And the last unit that I really want to talk to you about today is pure strain Genestealers. Now, a Genestealer Cult army wouldn't really be a Genestealer Cult army if you didn't have a couple of units of pure strain Genestealers in there. These guys are awesome. I mean, even if you just take one unit, guys, you know, like, just to go with the theme of the army. But it's not just about being a part of the theme of the army. They are just very, very good at what they do as well. Now, remember we spoke at the start about the Proficient Planning abilities, that you pay points to increase units and then they can do some stuff. Now, there was one called They Came From Below that I said would be fantastic on a Genestealer unit, and it's only 10 points. Now, remember what that lets you do is when you reveal Genestealers from an ambush marker, they can move immediately as though it was your movement phase. They can move 8 inches. So imagine you're going first. You reveal your ambush marker, and they move 8 inches. Then in your turn, remember there's that 1 CP stratagem where when a Genestealer unit from your army advances, don't roll a dice, they automatically advance 6. They go 14 inches. So for 10 points and 1 command point, this unit can move 8 inches and then move 14 inches. They move 22 inches from your deployment zone and then make a charge move. Now that's very powerful, especially when you learn what their stats are. So they're 14 points a model. So a unit of 10 pure strain Genestealers is 140 points. And if you pay the 10-point upgrade, they're 150 points. 10 pure strain Genestealers for 150 points. And you can cast Might from Beyond on them. Because remember, casting that, you only have to cast it on a cult unit. It doesn't have to be a core unit, just a cult unit. So you can cast that on them. And pure strain Genestealers have an attacks characteristic of 4. So when you spend that, you know, when you cast that power on them, they go up to an attacks characteristic of a 5. So they get 50 attacks. A 10-man unit will have 50 attacks, and they have a weapon skill characteristic of 2+. So they're going to hit on 2s. That means they should get 8 ones, possibly. So they're going to get 42 hits on the target. A unit of 10 pure strain Genestealers, just by casting 1 power on them, are going to get 42 hits on the enemy at strength 4, -3 AP and 1 damage. And what's more is models in this unit have a 4+ invulnerable save. So I actually think pure strain Genestealers, just for that threat turn 1, it will make your opponent deploy in a different way. You know, they'll play in a different way to avoid these pure strain Genestealers just hitting them wherever they want. So I think having at least 1 unit of pure strain Genestealers just with that 10-point upgrade on them can make them a massive threat and have to force your opponent to play in a different way. And remember what I always say is, where anything that you can do to make your opponent do something that they don't really want to have to do is always a benefit. And these guys hit like an absolute brick in combat, and they're fast. And they can just advance and charge naturally. It's in their, you know, it's on their data sheet that they can advance and charge. So you can have them advancing and charging, and then you can have a Metamorph or an Acolyte unit advancing and charging with a Stratagem as well. So you've got a lot more mobility than it first looks like you have in the army. Now, those are the main competitive units that I wanted to talk about. That's what I think the basis of every Genestealer Cult army should be built around. A couple of units of all the ones that we've spoken about with the characters that we said are a must-take. And that pretty much does bring you to about 2,000 points. So you can actually have a competitive, tricksy Genestealer Cult army again. So I'm overall very, very pleased with this book. I think it's fantastic, and it plays in a very fluffy manner. Like, it's narrative. They play the way that you would expect them to play in the fluff. So I'm actually very pleased with this codex. It's not the most overpowered codex. It's not like Drukhari or anything like that. And I don't think it will beat Thick City. Personally, in my opinion, they can hit hard, but they don't have the hitting power to hit as hard as something you need to kill Talos and Grotesque units. So I think they're very good, but I don't think they're top of the meta. That's where I think the Genestealer Cult Codex has landed. Now, guys, that was the Genestealer Codex review. I hope you've enjoyed it. And remember, in 2 days' time, there will be an Adeptus Custodes review also on the channel, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you've watched this far and you've enjoyed the video, please hit the subscribe button, notifications bell in the corner over there, so you know every time we release one of these videos. And if you enjoy the content, and you would like more exclusive content like weekly battle reports additional weekly battle reports, that is, and you would like amazing discounts off our web store, or you just enjoy what we do here at the channel and you'd like to support Glasshammer, then please head over to our website, glasshammergaming.co.uk, and join the elite. And like I say, guys, try out your Genestealer Cult, take this information on board. If there's any units that you think can be used in a very good way that I've missed there, please leave them in the comments below for everybody to share and grow, and also so I can learn some of your tricks off you. And I'll be back in 2 days with a Custodes review. See you later, guys. Have a good day.